mentioned, this will serve as a general onboarding with a little bit of deeper dive towards some of the more complex sides of the platform towards the end. This, may be somewhat of a repeat for some of you, but should serve as kind of a future reference for new individuals that we have come in. So my name is Travis Couture. I'm the founding solutions architect here at 12 Labs. So I've been lucky enough to kind of work in the AI ML space for like the last 5 years or so, and a lot of interesting things happening, especially in the video realm right now with 12 Labs. So what we'll kind of cover today is we'll do that overview, talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, what is video understanding, and why is that a little bit different than some of the other things that we've been doing with video over the years, and then maybe some use cases where we can apply 12 Labs using that kind of video understanding that we talked about. And then we'll talk a little bit about the playground. So not only, how to come in and use the videos that are already there, but more importantly, uploading your own content so you can actually see the things that you could really accomplish with video content that you own or have with you. And then at the end there, we'll talk about what that looks like from the API side. So the playground is sort of a good stomping ground or prototyping area to really understand what you can do with the platform. And then the API allows you to really kind of take things to the next level, as we'll see. So just some background about video and moving towards video understanding here. We kind of have this timeline of video is invented. Eventually, we need to be able to understand what's in video. That could be starting out with summaries of video, things like that are very non-specific. Eventually, right, we get speech to text, which allows us to do transcripts, which is nice because you get at least somewhat of an understanding as to what's going on in the video. The problem with transcripts alone is that they're only a single dimension of the data that's kind of representative of video. So video is a very complex data source. It has a lot going on in it. Not only do you have audio, you have visual cues, and then you also have the kind of chronological order of those things. So that contextual flow matters. Over time, we kind of added on top of that tags, which can help capture additional layers or add, additional context that isn't directly available in the transcripts that somebody might not say, but maybe visually in the scene. But that still is only capturing a portion, and that of course requires additional effort and work to go in as well too. And it limits the way that you can actually still search the video content, for example. So it's impossible to search for something that you don't have in your tag set list, which is kind of where video understanding comes in. And we want to look at the video as a whole. So we want to be able to take in all of the context and data available within a video, just like humans do. So when you're interacting with somebody in real life or watching a movie, you're storing all this information and processing it, right? So when you watch a movie, you have the audio cues, which are changing the mood of the scene and things like that. And so we want to be able to do that from a modeling perspective as well too. So you can essentially go to a model and have it interact with the video like a human would, but at a much larger scale. So this is where video understanding comes in, and specifically foundation models, which are able to broadly understand the context of all video like humans. So with this in mind, having this kind of capability provides a lot of utility in terms of the use cases that you can tackle using video that were previously intractable. So some of these things really don't make sense when you try and convert video to still images and things like that and perform the use cases on a reductionized version of the video. So using 12 Labs and our foundation model, you're able to kind of across various verticals cover some really interesting use cases, right? So things like content moderation and social media, for example. So video is actually notoriously hard to process what's going on in the entire length of the video, right? Is there toxic behavior in there, things like that? Having a foundation model like this makes that significantly easier. Images, right, are much more simplistic, and the data is also not as big, which is another factor as well too. Things like ad tech for advertising, so you're able to kind of reference the exact content within the video and serve a specific ad during that point in time. You can detect brand images potentially in the video, right? If you want to reach out to brands in your content for partnership deals and things like that. We definitely don't have to go through everything on this list. And of course, it's not exhaustive. We'll see this kind of evolve over time as people really start to use foundation models to their full capacity. But these are just some things that we worked with customers on and things that we thought about as well too. So if you think about all of these use cases as a whole, they can really be kind of boiled down to a very simple template in the way that the 12 Labs product offering sits into the use case itself. So at the bottom, you have the raw video content, which would be the client raw videos or the owner of the raw videos. You have the 12 Labs video embeddings, which the way that the embeddings work, we'll see here in just a moment, is the compactified representation of the video that allows us to do these kind of things at scale, right? So being able to do complex searches and things like that. And then on top of those embeddings is really where the user interaction happens. So we have the client application where the backend code is being integrated through the APIs. And the important part about this is that it allows you to kind of parse the API output and present it to your target audience in a way that's conducive for their workflow. So every kind of target audience is different for the video that they're working with, right? Some are end users and they're just interested in watching videos and things like that. Some of them are working more closely with videos. So for example, video editors and things like that, and they would want to have that result presented to them in a different way. So having this very easily accessible API from any language allows you to render that information in the client application very specific to the user workflow. And to get a little bit deeper into what's kind of underneath the APIs, right? How are we actually making this possible? We're essentially taking the raw video and through that multimodal process that I talked about before, we're considering all of the data streams in the video, right? So we're looking at the visual context, potentially text and video, the conversation itself. And what the foundation model actually does is it combines all that together and spits out a numerical representation of the video that we would call video vectors. And these video vectors can be stored permanently. And the nice thing about only indexing the videos, we call it once, is that you can very quickly go back to that stored version of the video in a way that the computers understand easily to iteratively perform tasks on the video without a lot of computational overhead. So this allows you to have, millisecond, second latency response times in terms of the API, which is really important when you're dealing with an end user application and users want a good user experience. So just for some context, you can think of the video embeddings as something smaller. So you may have like a full-size house, and then you can build a miniature version of that house. It still has all the information, right? The scale of the house, the layout of the rooms and things like that, but you build it out of Legos or something, right? And so now it's much smaller. And that's essentially what the video vectors are a very truncated representation of the raw video format itself. So like we were talking about, now you can take those video embeddings and specifically for the APIs, right, that we have available today, you do things like text to video search, video to video search, classify, all these types of tasks are actually possible once you have those embeddings available to be able to repeatedly use. So now we're going to hop over to the playground for a little bit here. We're going to cover a few things. So I'm going to switch over tabs here. And this will be the landing page that you'll see once you make a free account, and you can do that at the playground. You can sign up and start playing around and see what's going on in the platform with this walkthrough today, and then maybe get a little bit more advanced and explore on your own after that. So when you come to the home page here, you can see that we have two different options, right? We can kind of go down the search route or the classify route, and we'll explore both today. So first, we're going to take a little bit of a look at search here. So what we mean by search is actually searching for specific instances or moments across an entire video library. So this can be really powerful if you have thousands of hours of video and you want to look for a very specific moment, for example. So if I click on search here, it's going to take us to our indexes. And if I click the drop down over here on the left-hand side, I can actually come to our sample starter videos that we have here. And if I click the search bar, you're going to see that we have a list of pre-populated search queries for ourselves. So this kind of gives you a little bit inspiration as to, what can I search for? One thing that I think we see users kind of run into is the familiarity with like a Google interface where you have to be very tactful with the way you're searching in the search bar. Here, you can be a lot more free with what you're searching for, right? The model is very understanding in terms of like a semantic search. So what you're looking for doesn't have to be exact or specific, right? We don't have to have those keywords. We can be a little bit more vague, as we'll see here in a little bit. But for example, we can click the Phillies mascot searching, or Phillies mascot riding with Meek Mill here. And what you'll see is we'll have the top result, which is exactly what we're looking for actually. So in this particular index, we have over 9 hours of video. And we were very quickly, in seconds here on the screen, able to retrieve that exact moment that we want. So if I actually turn this on here, we can see exactly what we're looking for. And you can see kind of example of the API response, which we'll get into on the right-hand side here in just a little bit. You can get a little bit more crazy here. So in the starter videos, for example, let's say we want to search for Gordon Ramsay, and this will return all the videos of Gordon Ramsay that we have available. But the reason I want to kind of take this approach is I want to show how quickly you can iterate upon a search. So we might not know exactly what's in all of our video library, right? If we have 10,000 hours, maybe we just want to see how much content has Gordon Ramsay in it here. And you can see in this example, we have about 115 examples. Now, maybe I want to get a little bit more specific. So I don't want to just have Gordon Ramsay on the screen. I want to have Gordon Ramsay specifically chopping food, right? So Gordon Ramsay does a lot of things with food, obviously, but I want to find a specific moment of him doing that action. So if I click on this, you can see now we have Gordon Ramsay and also chopping food on the screen at the same time. So you can very quickly iterate on these searches without any delay in between them. So this is really powerful, either from end user perspective or a developer perspective, trying to provide a good user experience, because you don't have to worry about high latency times between searches. Things are executed pretty rapidly. The other thing I want to talk about here in the search aspect are the search options. So we kind of didn't talk about this initially, but it's important to bring up. We initially talked about video as a holistic view, right? So all of the data streams within video, but you may want to search individual context here or components. So here we were searching just the visual context, but I can also, for example, search for something in conversation only. So now maybe I just want to search for people talking about something specific as opposed to everything as a whole. So in this case, I could search for, let's say song, for example. I'm going to see when people are talking about songs. And when I search for that, if I click on the result that I have here, we have Charlie Puth talking about his process of developing the song. And in the conversation response over here, I can actually see the entire portion of the conversation that the search is actually latching onto. So in this particular case, you can actually see him mention the word song here in this particular conversation. So we're exactly saying song. There's an interesting thing you can do though, where you can think about a semantic or an exact match. So what we mean by semantic is if we say, a certain phrase or something like that, it might not be the exact thing in the conversation. So a good example that we have of this is if we change song to singing, for example, we can see the top result here is about individuals making music or singing, but we don't say singing explicitly in the conversation here. And we can kind of see that when we switch the conversation option from semantic to exact match. So what exact match does is it looks for the exact keyword that you're searching for in the conversation. And you can see when we switch to exact match, we don't have anything here in the search results actually. But if I go back to semantic, we get populated again with a bunch of results that are about singing, even though we're not mentioning the word singing explicitly in the conversation. So this kind of flexibility and being able to modularly select what you want to search for provides a lot of power in terms of gearing the end user experience, right? If you need to be very fine-tuned and specific with your types of searches and you want that kind of keyword functionality, you have exact match. But if you want to provide that vagueness and general interpretability of what the person is trying to say without them actually saying it in the search query, semantic is very powerful for that. We also have the same options, right, with the other two components here. So for text and video, for example, let's see, marinara maybe. So if I search for marinara, I can see all the times this appears on the screen. So in this case, right, you can see that marinara sauce is the hit here that's appearing on the screen for text and video. And if I open this up, you can see at the top up here, we have marinara sauce on the top. This is the same for logo as well. So logo is a little bit unique because it's somewhat of a subset of visual where we're looking for well-recognized symbols within a video. So for example, if I want to search for McDonald's, now I can see all the times that McDonald's appears here. So you can see, for example, in this video, we have the McDonald's logo in the back, and the logo that we're identifying is the McDonald's logo. So this is good for those use cases like contextual advertising or things like that, or brand partnerships. So that's just a quick overview of search in the playground. There are other things that you can play around with, but this is what I definitely wanted to cover today. The last thing that I wanted to show to really illustrate what we were talking about earlier for search with the capability of the model to very abstractly connect ideas is this search that we found the other day, which is pretty cool. So we're searching for a Bengals player, but we're using a weird terminology here where we're saying putting a football with an orange pylon. So this is interesting because you wouldn't, normally you wouldn't put putting along with football, right? Putting is a golfing action. And when you put it in the context of football, it's interesting. So the model here is actually understanding abstractly what we're trying to say. So we want to see a football player putting a ball with an orange pylon like it was a golf club. And so that's what we're seeing here in this example search. So I wanted to highlight that, showing that you don't have to be super specific with what you're looking for in your search queries, and the model will kind of understand what you're trying to say. The other segment here that we have of the APIs available in the playground is the classification certain path. So you can come to examples and we'll show the example here and then how you can modify that. And we can, for example, classify some videos by different tic-tac categories. So on the left-hand side here, you can see that we're choosing the index again. I'm saying the class group that we want to use. And what we mean by that is you can have different class groups which contain different sets of labels. And those labels can have different props that describe them. So for example, the labels that we have here for this class are beauty talk, dance talk, cook talk, all of these different talk categories that videos could fall into. So you can see here for this particular index, these are all the cook talk videos. So we're seeing things that are related to cooking or food here. We can see in the beauty talk category, right, we have, beauty influencers or things like that, people talking about makeup in this category. And animal talk, which would be my preferred, is where all the animals are showing up. Now, if we want to kind of see what's going on underneath the hood a little bit, we can click this edit button here for the select class group. And this is where we can understand a little bit more how we're actually deciding how to classify these labels. So if I come down to let's see, it's at the top here, the beauty talk, the talk categories that we have here, and I can show more. What we see is that we have these individual TikTok categories that we were classifying things into, and we have the descriptions of what we would like to have associated with that particular label. So it's not always clear if we want to have a label or a class for an index of videos, how we might describe that as a human. So we're able to kind of freeform add a prompt here, right? So for fashion talk, I could, add like dresses, for example. And now when we go to classify videos, what we're going to look for are these specific kind of prompts in the videos themselves to figure out, does the content in the video kind of match the description of the label that we're interested in? If the content in the video matches the descriptions that we have here, then it will end up in that particular category. The other thing that we have, which is pretty cool, is the magic prompt generator here. So let's say, for example, you have an index and you have a particular label and you've listed some things out, and now maybe you want to know what else you could potentially add that would make that prompt or label a little bit more specific. If you click the magic prompt generator here, what it will do is it will actually kind of look at the videos in the index and then generate a lot of the potential prompts for you. So the nice thing about having this vector representation or the video embedding stored is you can kind of get a general sense of what those embeddings represent based off of what the model has been trained on, right? So we're able to look at that and maybe make suggestions for you based off of what you're looking for. So the Magic Prompt Generator is pretty cool in that regard because you kind of really don't have to do any work, which is always nice when you have to do a little bit less. So that's showing classifying how you can edit. You can also add your own as well too, right? So if you just wanted to create a completely new group, class group and start adding classes and prompts to that, that's something you can do as well. The last thing that I really want to show here is how you create your own index, right? So we've been playing with indexes that already exist. So there are two ways to really do it. I'll go back to the overview page just because it's a little easy to see from here. So on the top, we looked at the search and classify workflows and the examples. And down at the bottom, you can see all the indexes that we've created in our account. But the first option that you have here is to create your own index. So when you create an index, the first thing you want to do is give it a name. So, cool index or something like that. And then you can select the engine, right? So the engine is kind of the underlying workhorse, no pun intended here with the horse on screen, that is processing the video and then also handling the queries as well too. When you select an engine here, we would recommend 2.5 and we're going to go 2.5. That's the latest version that's available for our model and indexing engine. You're able to select the different indexing options that you want to use. So in some cases, you might not be interested in finding logos in your videos, for example. So you can turn that indexing option off. And then that way you're not using additional resources to process any of the logo detection or anything like that within your videos. So if you purely only wanted to do visual search, you could only turn on the visual option. And this allows you to kind of modularly select which types of search you want to allow or which types of classification components you want to look at when you actually go to perform some of the actions that we were just talking about. So this is just a quick overview of creating your own index. After you create this, you would upload your own videos. And I would really encourage anybody that's exploring the platform to actually do that because it's really interesting and powerful to see the search applied to your own content in a way that you might not have been able to do before. So I think, I will pause here because we do have a decent amount of time and just see if there are any questions that we want to take before we hop over to the advanced workflow with the APIs, what you can do there that you can't necessarily do in the playground. I think So Young was answering a lot in the chat here, but I want to see if there's anything we want to take verbally on the call before we move on.
I had a question if you could just go over the scoring results from your classification search.
Sure, yeah, let me go ahead and go back here.
Yeah, I was just about to answer that, but I think Travis could probably.
Sure.
Yep.
You can go back. Okay, yes. So what was your question there?
Just get an explanation. I'm reading the score versus duration. Is it a weighting factor? Is it just what's the formula behind this?
Yeah, so if you think about an entire video, right, you may have segments of the video that match the label that you're looking for and segments of the video that don't match it. So the score is the confidence in the assignment of the label to that particular video. The duration ratio is how much of the video really contains that label, right? So maybe if you're watching like a wildlife documentary, for example, a lot of it will be animals, but some of it will be, the researchers or the humans talking about the animals where the camera pans to them, for example. Those regions of the video might not necessarily be assigned as animals, right? That would be a human, and so it wouldn't receive that. But the majority of the video would receive the animal assignment or label, and so you would have a higher duration ratio in that case. We'll see in the API workflow here in just a little bit how you can get a little bit more detailed with that. The playground abstracts some of that complexity away for a little bit more of a simplistic user experience on the front end, but you're able to access all that information from the API so you can get very fine-tuned and geared towards how you would want a workflow to be presented to a target audience, for example. Does that explanation make sense, or is it still a little unclear?
Oh, that's good. Just reminding me from when I played with it before. I think the API has more stuff than my view of the world is only in the playground. So my questions tend to be around that, like I would love to know
Hmm.
what contributed to that score. Was it visual? Was it semantic? Was it OCR? Was it, so some kind of,
Yeah.
in that bar, if it had colored bars, like a stacked view or something, it'd be interesting to use that as a visual.
Totally. Yeah, so I think that's
Sorry, go
really
ahead.
sorry. Yeah,
go on.
that's really good feedback. I think so that's actually something we are working on. So like there's the API side of things where you can get more granular in terms of the classification results, understanding what contributed to a video being classified, what moments and things like that. And we will bring that onto the playground so that you can visually see it. So totally relate as a playground user, I totally relate to that. Yeah, it will, I think it'll be there sometime soon.
Yeah. One thing I'll say in regards to that, and that's a good point, Soyoung, is that the playground is underneath the hood, leveraging the APIs that you would leverage as a developer, right? We're not doing anything special in the playground besides using the APIs that we've already built. So eventually, right, all the features will get kind of pulled into playground that we have exposed from the API perspective. It's just the additional, engineering effort on top to make the UI and a way that's a good experience for the users, but eventually, right, you'll have access to all that information. So just wanted to point that out. Any other questions we want to take here before we move on to the API side of the house?
There was so Michael had one other question, just a great question on whether if there's a new model being released, whether videos have to be re-indexed. So we actually don't. In most cases, we actually don't store raw video data, which means that if you want to re-index with a new model, you would have to resubmit the video for re-indexing. Yeah.
Let's see here. It looks like we had another question come in about the privacy of videos uploaded under the free account. So when you upload to the playground, so there's two ways to think about this, depending on if you're going to take the playground approach to play around with the video data that you upload or the API approach. So in terms of the playground, when you upload video, we do retain that video for a period of time, whether you can specify that, or if you're on the free account, right, indexes expire after a certain amount of time and the information associated with those indexes is removed. And the reason why we have to retain the raw video file when you upload it to the playground here is we need to be able to play the video when you click on it. So when you click on the video, you actually want to see that visual representation of the video and the result, either for classify or for search. And without the raw video file, we can't map the search results back to the actual video itself. Now, from the API perspective, this is a different story. When you upload videos strictly that you want to use with the API, you don't care about the playground, we actually don't have to store the raw video in that regard, because we assume that you'll have access to the raw video on your end, and what you're primarily interested in is returning those search results back from the API to use on your side in your workflows. So since you'll maintain the raw video on your side, all we need to store is the embedding representation or the vector representation that we talked a little bit earlier in the discussion, and we can iterate the searches or the classification or whatever task that we want on those embeddings, return the results, and then the results map back to the raw video on your side. So depending on the workflow you choose either Playground or API, will dictate whether or not we have access, not direct access, but whether we're storing those videos on our end. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that, but that's a very high level overview.
Yeah.
And hopefully that answers your question. I think it was Pranay that asked that in the chat. So.
Yeah, I hate typing. So thanks. Yeah, makes sense. Just didn't want someone to look like a terrible tennis player and then have me pop up.
Yeah. No worries. Okay. I think that catches us up on the questions, right, Soyoung? I think we can slide on over to the API side now.
Yep.
Perfect. So I'll switch back over to the presentation here. And for this particular discussion, I just kind of wanted to quickly show on screen what you can do with the API. I didn't want to kind of do a deep dive into code here because I think that's better served for a follow-up call or workshop or something like that we can definitely have for those that are really interested in getting the developer experience with the API. But I did want to show what is really possible with the API that you can't do in the playground yet, that again, you will eventually be able to do, to kind of give you a teaser of the cool possibilities that you have at your disposal if you really want to start leveraging this, in maybe a production type scenario or something like that. So the first thing we can think about are combined or complex queries, however you want to think about that. And essentially what we do there is we have two or more individual queries that we're linking together with two or more what we'll call logical operators, right? So if you're not familiar with logical operators, these are things like or, and, or not. And then we also have a special one called then that we don't have to get into, but at least the first three, right, are pretty self-explanatory. So or in this case, what we're searching for is in this index, I want all the instances of video segments that have a red car or a blue car. Right, so any video that has a red car or a blue car in it will return in the search results. Now, if we flip this over to and, for example, then we would only return the results that have a red and a blue car in the video segments that we're looking at. And then not and then are a little bit more specific. And if you're interested in those, right, we have the API documentation and reference guide, which we'll show on the screen a little bit later here. But this is something really cool that you can do because there are really interesting things that you can do with the combined search that you can't do with a simple search. So one example is you might want to look for all the instances where somebody is laughing, but not when they're sitting down, right? You only want to find instances where they're standing up and not sitting down and laughing. So that's something that you can do easily with a combined query that's a little bit more difficult to do with a singular query, for example. And you're not limited to just two, right? You can really stack these together and get really crazy with it if you really want to keep adding levels of granularity to the combined or complex search. The next thing that we can talk about here is thresholds. So we do somewhat expose this in the playground with the labels for the confidence levels, so low, medium, or high. But there are other things that you can look at, especially on the classify side. So we had a question about this earlier. What does the ratio mean, for example, and why is that result returned and not other results? So in the thresholds request that you actually send to the API for the classify, we can look at things like the minimum video score, the minimum clip score, and the minimum duration ratio. So we sort of talked about these three things earlier, but just to reiterate, we're only going to return a video, for example, if for the min video score, if the accepted value for the whole video exceeds that threshold. It's the same thing for the minimum clip score. So we may want to classify clips as opposed to whole videos. And the difference between those is a video is the entire video itself, and a clip is a segment within a video, right? So a subset of the video itself. So that segment score is something different, or the clip score is something different than the broader video score. And then the min duration ratio is what we talked about earlier, where how much of the video actually is classified under that class or label that you're looking at here. So these are just some examples on the thresholding side. You can also set like exact score values and things like that. But this is just, again, we don't want to go into exhaustive detail, just provide a little bit of a teaser what you can do in the API that you can't do in the playground just yet. The other really cool thing, and this is actually really interesting, especially for developers and a good end user experience, is you can do filtering on metadata. So it is really cool to be able to get these search results back instantly, but a lot of times you want to actually get a little bit even more targeted based off of, for example, like a user session, right? There might be information about that user or something else, or information about the video specifically that you want to filter on that you can have here in the filtering section. So in this example here, right, we're doing a filter on a custom metadata field called views. So all videos indexed have metadata associated with them, right? They have the file name that they were sourced from. They have the frame rate, the length, things like that. But as the developer, you can actually add custom fields, which is powerful because then you get really specific to your content. So here we're adding a custom field called views. And in this case, I'm looking exactly for a video that has 120,000 views. But you'll see on the right-hand side that we can actually use comparison operators, for example. So if I only wanted to filter by, high view videos, let's call them, and have a custom threshold for that, where I would say greater than or equal to 1 million views, for example. Now I'm only showing search results that match the user's query, but also that are extremely popular with other users, for example. We can do this on different types of fields. So we have the numeric fields where you can actually do those comparison operators. And then we can do filtering on string fields as well too, right? So if you want to only find videos uploaded by a specific user, for example, you can do that with the string filtering option here. And you can add whatever you want really to the metadata section. So you can kind of use your imagination as to some of the really cool things that you could do there. The next section here is the way in which you actually index videos through the upload process. And typically, right, uploading videos from local is really easy for experimenting and playing around and figuring out a lot of the things that you can do with your local content. But when you start to think about this from a production perspective, or really wanting to scale this out from the developer side, most of video content is stored somewhere else. So in this example here, right, we're talking about cloud transfers. So you could, for example, set up the indexing engine to accept video files from an S3 location. So in this case, the way that works is instead of uploading locally, selecting files from the browser window, you can submit a JSON to the cloud transfer endpoint. And what this will allow you to do is in that JSON file, specify the object location. And then if you have any additional information associated with that, like if you already have a transcript file that you want to use instead of having us transcribe the conversation, you can do that as well too. And this allows you to kind of do that massive bulk upload, right? So you can have like 10,000 videos in an S3 location, send the JSON to the endpoint, and then the cloud transfer will happen without you having to pull any videos down locally, which is a much better workflow and scales significantly better than downloading 10,000 videos locally and then re-uploading them. One other thing that's really interesting that we came across is the ability to have thumbnail generation for the search result. So this is really powerful because it lets you do a lightweight preview, for example, of that particular moment in the video. So if you're dealing with a lot of video data, images are always lighter to deal with, right? So when you actually set up an index, a new index, one of the things that you can specify is the add-ons here. And you can say, I want you to generate thumbnails for the moments where a search result matches, and that allows an easy way to kind of preview in a light fashion the portion of the video or the segment of the video that you're going to be looking at for that search result. The other thing, which is really cool, that ties the two together, which I kind of hinted at, where I was saying, the playground does leverage the APIs under the hood, is you can actually mess around in the playground to get an idea of what, the experience or workflow you would like to create would be. And then you can get the matching code that's auto-generated for that. So for this example here, right, very simple. I go to an index, I search for food, and now if I want to create an API call from that, I can actually click the view code button directly in the playground. And this gives me the sample request with the exact options that I have filled out here. So this is a good way to kind of very quickly generate code in the playground, copy it over, and make it more generic, for example, on the developer side of things. So this will save a lot of time and a lot less headache. The other thing that we can do when we were doing the searches, we were searching the individual components. We can actually kind of fully extract those components if we would like. So here we're showing if you want to get the transcription, so the entire transcription, if you want to get all the text in the video, if you want to get all the logos detected in the video, we have endpoints that are available for all three of those options today. So this can be useful, right? If you have different use cases that you want to have. So maybe you want to generate like subtitles automatically, and you just want to pull the transcription and then generate subtitles for the specific search moments for accessibility, things like that. You can do all these things very easily with these three APIs here. The last thing I want to talk about is the API builder. So the API builder is a more full-fledged, powerful, generic version of the view code option in the playground. So the view code option in playground is awesome because it automatically will convert what you've done to the code view. But again, you can't do absolutely everything in the playground that you can do with the API. The API builder, you can actually go to the API reference guide, see every single endpoint that you can use, and then generate a sample request in a number of different languages. So I can kind of show that on the screen really quickly, just so we get a little bit more concrete with it. So if I go to docs.12labs.io, you can also access this from the playground, the docs icon here in the top right. I can go to the API reference. And then for any of the endpoints that I want to use, I can actually build a API request. So let's say, for example, the indexes and videos option here, one thing we were just talking about is I want to get back the all the text in the video only, for example. So if I click on that text recognized in video OCR endpoint, this will take me to the API builder, and you can see, right, I can, if I want to build it Go or Node.js or general JavaScript, I can select the language that I want, and then I can add the values in the field here. And what's nice about this as well too is the API builder tells you what the expected type is for that field. And then if it is a categorical field, right? So the different categorical values that are actually valid for that field. So this allows you to very easily build valid requests and troubleshoot requests that are coming back incorrectly. And then we also list the different response codes that you can see here. So I can see, for example, what would the expected data format be if I'm going to extract video, extract all the video from a particular video in my index. So if I click on the 200 result here, which is a valid result, you can see the JSON structure of that return, that response from the request, which allows you to then, build the rest of the pipeline downstream to parse that result so you can use that in your application. On the flip side, I can actually see what an invalid result looks like and what we would return back from that as well too. So that way you can do error handling, right? So an end user application handling errors gracefully is something that we want to always be able to do. And so the API builder allows you to very quickly do that as well too. That is, what's kind of on the API side there. I did want to kind of show general workflow landscape of everything that we just talked about and kind of what's possible in the playground today versus what's possible in the API. And remember, over time, this dotted box for playground is going to expand to cover more of the boxes here that we have in the API. And then, on the flip side of that, the API boxes are also going to be expanding as we add new features, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Before we talk about some cool stuff coming up, I want to see if there are questions on the API side of the house, since, it's a little bit more of an advanced topic that I don't know if we've gotten into super deeply on the meetup. So I want to see if there are any questions from the audience. I think So Young, you were still answering a few, so.
So one is we have a question about whether we can provide some examples of the API in action. And
okay. Yeah, so
I think the reference, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, so if you want to.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. The reference probably, yeah.
Yeah, so you can actually do this from the API reference builder. So you can actually enter valid values here. So I could actually put, an index ID here or a video ID. So let's say, for example, right, I want to list all of the videos in a particular index. Let me go here, go to list videos. If I put in a valid index ID, and then I also enter my valid API key, which is down here at the bottom, and you click try it, like we can actually run this result. So you can see here, the response we actually run this in the browser when you click submit. So here I didn't enter an API key, so it's telling me that. So if I pasted my API key here and ran this, it would actually give me a valid result, and I could actually see the API in action without even having to code anything out. I can let the API generator make it for me. Let's see. Do we have any other questions here?
That's
There's one more.
Question on the SRT file. First of all, I would love to have that. To upload an SRT file with the video at the same time would be handy, but that would be coming in the future. But my question specifically was, does defining the language in the SRT file help or not help, or do you do automatic language detection, or how does it, what's it do with it?
I see. You mean the actual spoken language, right? So English or French, yeah. That's actually an interesting point and something that we're going to talk about actually at the end of this. So, so it's easier. We are working on the multilingual support for that. So that's something that we're working towards to be able to handle that, more automatically on our end.
Okay.
Let's see, I think there was one final question. Oh, so yeah, it looks like you answered that one already. Perfect.
There's a question on rate limits for the API, and I think, Travis, you were going to go into the different plans we have available.
Yeah, exactly.
Here, the rate limit would be here.
Yeah, so the different tiers that we have available, right? So the free plan is kind of what's available when you come into the playground, you sign up to explore things. So this is good for the testing and building phase. If you have less than 10 hours of video, and we kind of limit the daily searches to 50. And then the indexes that you create there, right? If you create your own index, those expire after 90 days. So this is really good for getting your feet wet, understanding what you can do. And then once you're ready to kind of take the next step, you can move to the developer plan, which is good for kind of growing a particular, let's say, targeted use case or something like that, right? You have a use case that you want to apply the 12 Labs platform to. And so this is good for anything around 1,000 hours of video or less. The daily search requests go up quite a bit, all the way up to 3,000. And then the indexes don't expire at all, right? So those indexes are preserved until you delete them. And then if you're, executing on the developer plan, and you're really enjoying that experience, and you want to take it to the next level and multiple use cases across the entire organization or enterprise, that would be kind of like the custom tier, where we would actually want to work with you directly to figure out your exact needs, so that way we could provide you the best experience possible in terms of not only functionality, but experience with the actual platform itself, and making sure that you have, in some cases, right, dedicated queues or hardware from our side on the API to service the large amount of requests that may be coming in. So that's something that we can also do at that level. So we have the 3 different levels here that allow you to kind of, play around, do something specific for a use case, and then really transform the organization from the video perspective, using all of the functionality that 12 Labs has to offer. Yeah. And then the last thing we want to talk about here a little bit is the roadmap. So, what we can currently do that's already available, right? We can do, the search for the text to video, we can do video classification. And then what we have, roadmap coming up fairly soon, things like the multilingual and mobile support. So we want to be able to handle languages from various countries and things like that, as well as provide a good mobile experience. So that way, if you're coming in from your phone or something like that, the experience on your phone is just as good as the experience on your desktop. And then we also have video to text generation. So being able to do things like generate captions, descriptions of a video automatically just based off of what you've uploaded. So that's also coming as well. And then probably, the one that a lot of people are really going to enjoy is the ability to upload from a YouTube URL. So if you just, bring a YouTube URL or list of URLs, you could upload that easily and create an index of that, and then be able to search all those videos from YouTube, for example. So that's pretty cool from the roadmap perspective. And then we're going to have some more exciting stuff down the line as well, too, that you should keep an eye out for, that we'll talk about in future sessions. So, and the last point for the future sessions is next month, we kind of want to, give you some time to maybe digest this, let people play around a little bit more, especially on the API side, maybe. And then, we'll have like an Ask Me Anything or Q&A next month. So you can submit your questions all the way up to next month. They can be anything, and I'll still try and answer them as long as I can. So that's kind of the end of the presentation talk here. I thank you guys for the questions. It was very interactive, which is always pleasant on my side. So I'll kind of turn it over to the audience. If there are any unanswered questions or things that we didn't cover that you're interested in, I'd love to take those now. So